everybody. Welcome to session 2B, Building Success Stories. I am so happy you're here. We have a great lineup today. I am Ellen Shepard. I'm an outreach manager with Energy Trust of Oregon's New Buildings program in Portland, Oregon, and president of the Columbia River chapter of AEE. And I'm privileged to be the chair of this session. We have a great lineup today, and I'll introduce those folks here in just a minute. But first, I did want to encourage each of you to submit questions throughout the presentations. We will have Q&A at the end of each presenter, but please do feel free to submit questions if you have them, as you think of them throughout their presentations, and we'll ensure we get to those at the end. So our first speaker today is Travis Vilak. Travis is an engineer in training and certified energy manager based out of Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. So Travis, I will let you do a little more of an introduction and take it from there. And we look forward to hearing your presentation.
All right. I just want to start by saying thank you for your time this afternoon, and I hope you're enjoying the virtual conference so far. Today I'm going to talk about climate projections for the Metro Vancouver region, where by the 2050s, we're anticipating an average temperature increase of about 3 degrees Celsius. And we're going to talk about how we can use smart windows as an option for our climate resiliency strategy. Before I get into the content, I do want to just take a moment to introduce myself and also acknowledge that I am presenting from the Burnaby SFU campus, which is on unceded Coast Salish territory. My name is Travis Vilak. I'm an electrical engineer in training based out of Coquitlam, BC, Canada. I've previously completed a Diploma of Technology in Instrumentation and hold a bachelor's degree in electronics. I also hold a certificate in Sustainable Energy Management and I'm currently working on a graduate diploma for business administration. I work for Simon Fraser University, or SFU, which originally opened its doors in 1965 to 2,500 students. Currently, SFU is ranked as Canada's #1 comprehensive university by Maclean's magazine, and it includes over 100 academic programs, including a new Sustainable Energy Engineering program, which just took in its first cohort last September. Since it opened its doors, SFU has grown to over 37,000 students. But currently only our lab buildings have chillers in them. So most of our other buildings are heating only and ventilation only. We're also operating during the summertime now, which wasn't done historically. So this presents a new challenge to us in that we don't have cooling in these spaces, but we're now running 12 months a year. So this creates a lot of overheating problems for us in the summer now. And as the climate continues to warm, we're going to start facing new challenges that we didn't have to deal with historically. The agenda for today for the presentation is just on the screen there. What I'm hoping to accomplish with our time today is to talk about climate resiliency and how dynamic glazing can be used as a resiliency strategy. I'll first run through a pilot project we conducted before we did a full glazing redo on a building. So without further ado, let's get to it. To take a step back, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the driving force for our discussion today on climate resiliency. The picture on the screen is the average variation of global surface temperatures from 1884, or just after the Industrial Revolution. The dark blue indicates areas that were cooler than average, and the dark red indicates areas that were warmer than average. Fast forward to, well, I guess not today, but 2019, and this is where we're at. Scientists have attributed this global warming trend observed since the mid-20th century to the human expansion of the greenhouse effect, or the warming that results when the atmosphere traps heat. Carbon dioxide is the main cause of human-induced climate change. We emit CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels, and it's a very long-lived gas. CO2 continues to affect the climate systems during its long residence time in the atmosphere. The magnitude of future warming will be determined by the extent of our GHG or greenhouse gas emissions today and by our mitigation efforts in the future. I'm sure most people have heard this anecdote before, and I'm sure you've seen a similar graph as the one that's on the screen right now. But what I'm sure I'm going to bet you haven't heard is Canada is actually warming at twice the global average rate. The annual average temperature in Canada has increased by 1.7 degrees Celsius between 1948 and 2016, which is roughly twice the observed rate for the Earth as a whole. Annually and seasonally, the average temperatures across Canada have increased, with the greatest warming occurring during the winter. In Canada, the loss of snow and sea ice is reducing the reflectivity of the surface, which is increasing the absorption of solar radiation heat. We'll come back to this concept of the absorption of solar radiant heat in a few slides, but what it's doing is it's causing a larger amount of surface warming in northern regions. Because of this and other mechanisms, Canada is warming at an accelerated rate. Located east of the Strait of Georgia and just north of Washington State, the Metro Vancouver area, which encompasses 21 municipalities, is warming even faster than the Canadian average. This is just a Google Earth shot of the region here, just to kind of reiterate how many municipalities are here. And this here is what the historic winter nighttime low temperatures have looked like. So around freezing. And then this is where we're expecting to go by the 2050s. Current climate projections for Metro Vancouver anticipate that the average temperature for the area will increase by about 3 degrees during that time. To clarify, that's 3 degrees Celsius. What this accelerated warming means for Metro Vancouver is that our region can expect more than twice as many summer days above 25 degrees Celsius, going from an average of 22 days per year to 55 days per year. And sorry, the graphic is a little blurred there, but should come out clear in the conference proceedings. What this projected warming has implications for is for the future energy supply. Heating demand for buildings is expected to decrease by 29%, while cooling demand is expected to increase by nearly 6 times what it is in the region. To combat this increase in the average temperature and hot summer days and extreme weather events, we need to be building more resilient buildings, and we need to be retrofitting the existing building stock. Climate resiliency can be classified as activities that improve our ability to prepare, respond to, and recover from climate-related stresses. It's typically categorized into 2 categories, mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is about reducing risk. In the context of climate change, that means reducing our GHG emissions. Adaptation is about taking action to manage these risks associated with climate change. Dynamic glazing is a solution that fits nicely into both of these categories as both a mitigation and adaptation strategy. Dynamic glazing, or smart windows, or even more accurately, electrochromatic windows, work by adjusting glazing tint levels in response to external conditions, such as sunlight or occupant preference. To loop back to the absorption of solar heat that we talked about earlier, dynamic glazing reduces the heat gain in a building by reflecting the solar heat away. Natural ventilation and passive strategies are good for shoulder season, but with the extreme heat events that we're anticipating in the future, it won't be enough for us, especially on campus here, because we don't have mechanical cooling. We need to be able to minimize the amount of heat that is being absorbed or even just in general heat that's being generated or transmitted into the building. The product that we use for the pilot project and the water tower building project that we'll talk about today were from View Incorporated. This product in particular has 4 tint levels as shown on the screen there. The tint level of the window is changed by a controller that has a photocell on the input to sense the outdoor light level and varies the tint level accordingly. The tint level is changed by a voltage signal and is controlled by the window controller. This helps us reduce heat gain during the summer. And in general, it can help reduce your HVAC energy consumption via less mechanical cooling. It eliminates the need for shades or blinds inside of the occupied space, which gives us additional O&M savings, and it enhances comfort by reducing the glare for occupants in the space. These windows also actually have a phone app to allow occupants to override the tinting level if they find that the optimized level is uncomfortable for them. To test out the product, we started with an area on campus that was susceptible to overheating in the summer. Most of SFU is precast concrete with many windows that are still single pane glazing. And with the age of the buildings and the asbestos abatement costs associated with renovations, it can be challenging to get envelope projects off the ground. This particular area of campus housed part of our math department, where the south-facing facade would frequently overheat and cause the staff to experience heat stress. With no mechanical cooling in this area of campus, the space would become too hot to work in during the summer months. In the summer, space temperatures were above 25 degrees Celsius about 21% of the time during working hours, with maximum space temperatures of about 28 degrees being observed during these hours. I put some numbers up on the screen there just to show how the solar heat gain coefficient changes with the tinting level. We went with a double pane IGU configuration for this application. I just want to note that triple pane is available, but it was above and beyond what we needed for this application and for what we were trying to accomplish with this pilot project. What I find interesting with the tint levels, and maybe you will too, is if you're familiar with building controls, trim and respond or demand control strategies are critical to the success of your energy savings with HVAC systems. The tint level that adjusts to match the needs of the space based on the solar heat gain is like adding a trim and respond strategy to your building envelope, which I find really neat because now we can start thinking of the building envelope as an active component that changes to match the needs of the users and not just a stationary mass. Let's put a couple more pictures or a few more pictures just up on the screen there. A couple things I just wanted to point out from the inside. One, you'll notice that we have a conduit run to our window there. This is for the data connection to the dynamic glazing. The user in the space have a phone app so they can override the tint level if they don't like the level that's being used. The window controller that automates everything lives in a mechanical room nearby and provides a cloud connection for the phone app. To say that a little bit differently, these windows are connected to the internet. The pilot project for us was a success because we were able to reduce the number of occupant complaints in the area. Space temperatures above 25 degrees Celsius, we were able to get that to only be 7% of the time with the dynamic glazing retrofit. This is down from the 21% that we observed previously during working hours. For a standard 8-hour workday, what that would be like is it would be like having a high temperature and uncomfortable situation for half an hour a day instead of 2 hours a day, which is pretty substantial. So as a result of the dynamic glazing that we added, the space is now more resilient to heat stress events. I put some of our major takeaways from the project just on the screen there. But what we learned a number of things from running a pilot project first. One error that we made that can be a pitfall when you're running a pilot project in general, when you're trying to keep the cost down, is not having the appropriate people at the table early on. We relied on our vendor to design and install the product, and we engaged a building envelope consultant too late in the project. Window details need to be done correctly. There's a lot of potential for discontinuity in the air barrier if they're not done properly. We would have benefited from engaging a building envelope consultant earlier on in the design of the project. And a couple of other details you should expect is there's a bit of a premium in both the material costs and the labor. There definitely is an incremental cost going towards a higher end IGU instead of a regular thermally broken double pane window. There's also additional labor costs because you need to also commission the new functions on the windows where you now have the tint level control. Ultimately, we were able to achieve our goals and make the space more resilient to hotter temperatures in the summer, and we were able to build a degree of confidence about the performance of the View Glass product. Coming off the success of our pilot project, we prepared our business case and internal memo for our executive team for why we wanted to pursue this project at the water tower, or pursue this product at the water tower building. I have the Google Earth shot on the screen there, and no, the water tower building is not the silo, which, fun fact, is actually a water tower. It's the building beside it. The water tower building was originally built in 1965, and it was one of the original buildings on campus. It used to actually be an old BC Hydro building. It houses SFU's IT services department, and from this angle, it kind of looks like a spaceship, which is kind of fitting because it houses one of Canada's most powerful supercomputers. Prior to the upgrade, it also had single pane windows on precast concrete like our pilot project. I'm just going to highlight some of the pictures from construction for before and after to share some more of our lessons learned before we conclude the presentation for today. So this is one of the construction photos here. One challenge we ran into on the office level when the windows were going on top of the radiator cabinets there was the new windows were much thicker than the original windows. We went from a window frame, IGU in general, that was about 1 inch thick to about 5 inches thick. So that posed some challenges for us. I showed it on the slide there, but what we had to do was with the building envelope consultant that we had engaged, we had to get a detail to fix this. We couldn't just stick the glazing right out in the sill. We had to recess it a little bit so that we could protect it from water ingression on the top, so that we didn't have water coming in, which is a bit of an issue in Vancouver, as you'll get kind of a similar climate to Seattle there. So we didn't have the entire top of the cabinet to work with there. But luckily, because we had a building envelope consultant on our team, he was able to help us with that detail. This next shot here, this is a view from a corner from just inside and outside, because I wanted to show off the tint and what it looks like from the outside versus the inside. I also wanted to point out one of the details in this photo that you probably can't see yet. It's just in the upper left corner of the window from the inside shot. It's about the same plane as the security camera that's there. Just up there where the arrow is. But actually we had to, again, like I showed with the conduit from the pilot project, we had to run wires to these windows. So I have a during construction shot and a finished product shot there. The cables were hidden through some creativity from the contracting team, but you can see just how many cables that we needed for the window to pull it there. These are details that'll get sorted out in the shop drawings. One thing we did miss, and it is a deficiency that I want to point out as well, so that you don't miss it when you're doing your smart window projects, is the sealant of the cables at the window frame. There needs to be some sealant there to maintain the air barrier continuity, or your ABC. This area here in particular needs scaffolding to access it, so it's a bit challenging now to come back after the fact and to address it. This is why, again, having a building envelope consultant on your team who can perform field reviews and catch these details early is so important. Lastly, this is a side-by-side of the same area outside where we were waiting for the teak wood trims to come in there. So you can just see we can match the aesthetic of the building with the product, which is for a campus application such as ourselves, it's important when we do retrofits so that we can maintain the look across all of campus. As we finish up the presentation, I just wanted to leave some closing thoughts on doing a full building glazing retrofit. To sum it up in one sentence, the devil is in the details. You have to make sure you have the right project team members on board early enough and at the right time so that you do it right the first time. You don't want to do it nice because you did it twice. For this project, we're collecting the M&V data now so we can start evaluating performance for a full building retrofit of the dynamic glazing. But I think for your application, you do need to remember that different buildings will have different challenges, so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And make sure you engage your building envelope consultant so they can help you with these details. In conclusion, to quote Albert Einstein, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. The world in 2050 and beyond is going to present new problems to solve, and different problem-solving methods will be needed. All good projects start with planning and having the right people on the team early. Don't forget to engage your building envelope consultant who can help with determining if a dynamic glazing solution is feasible for your application. And just before we go, I have 3 more slides with additional resources so they could be included with the conference proceedings here. This first one here, this one is additional climate resiliency and climate change resources. I'll leave it up for a couple of seconds here so you can take a screenshot if you are interested in it. This next one here is some resources for high performance building standards that are more envelope centric. And at the bottom there is a link to the vendor's website for the product that we used in these 2 projects. And lastly, these are the sources I pulled my information from for the presentation. And I hope that you have enough information now to make an informed decision about dynamic glazing and can share in some of the successes that we've had with it. I just want to say thank you again for your time and take care. Hopefully we can do this in person next time.
Thank you so much, Travis. That was very, very interesting, and I agree with you. Hopefully we can do it in person next time. So thank you for sharing that, those case studies and your experience with dynamic glazing. It's not a product I'm super familiar with, so I really enjoyed learning more about it. Particularly how the windows are connected to the internet. I find that a particularly compelling thing. Maybe could you speak a little more to that?
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit more about the Windows having an IP address, so to speak. It's definitely unique. From my background being in instrumentation primarily, I found it really interesting, but it's really cool because you're taking what would traditionally be a passive component, be it your building envelope or just your glazing in general, and you're turning it into an active component, and it's you're making the building more reactive, and it's I just really like it that if it's a sunny day, I can walk by the building and see that it's blocking out the sunlight, and it's keeping our stakeholders inside the building nice and cool and comfortable.
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting. So just a reminder, if you have questions for Travis, please do submit those. We do have a question here. It says, what is the life expectancy of a smart window?
Yes, the life expectancy of a smart window. That's a good question to ask. It's with this particular product, because we're still kind of in that testing phase of it, and we're still piloting it. It's we're still getting data on it. It's still using a like a traditional aluminum metal frame, so we're expecting from that aspect of it to be what you would expect from, say, traditional glazing. So that 30 to 40 years, if it's been maintained properly. But also with the glazing component, there's actually been testing from ASTM and NREL actually to test to make sure how many cycles the tinting can go through. I think they stop at about 50,000 cycles, but it's that's how they kind of break out the different components there. There is a published white paper about some of this info. If you're curious, I could also I can look up who asked the question after, and I can share that if you want to know more info.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned maintenance. Can you talk a little bit about is the maintenance different for these kind of windows versus a traditional window?
The maintenance for these windows versus to like a traditional window, it's you'll still have, because the framing component is still the same as a traditional window, you'll still have some of your similar requirements that way. But when you're starting to look at, say, your incremental labor, so the labor that you're either saving or that you're adding to it, one part that we saved on is because we don't actually need any blinds or curtains in front of the windows anymore. Just the labor from maintaining components that move or have regular wear and tear from use, we've eliminated that part of it. But also where we've lost in some aspects, but was also part of the learning process, was now we have a sensor tied to the window, so we have to make sure that the sensor is being maintained properly. And this actually might be a good point to talk about the photocell that we use on one of our lessons learned with it. When we put in the photocell originally, if you've done any DDC or building automation projects in the past, if you've ever done photocells or outdoor sensors, you know you generally want to have them in protected areas. But with the glazing project, you're putting the sensor in a different location than you traditionally would. And by that, I mean, because we're putting the photocell basically on a south-facing area that's not necessarily protected from the elements, we've actually had some issues with water ingression. So in our pilot project, we actually had to replace the photocell once, and then actually from my controls and instrumentation background, I took it apart, took some pictures, sent it back to the vendor so they could correct the sensor in future iterations. But that's sort of where we won on O&M, where we lost on O&M. But I'm hoping as the product gains more of a foothold in the industry and more people start playing with it, that there's more wins than there are losses with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the new product, there's always going to be a little bit of give and take for sure. I'm glad you were able to take that lesson learned into a success story, though. So that's nice to hear. We have another question. So, are the physical damage risks different in this application as compared with a traditional window or compared with a solar shade?
That's a good question. So for physical damage risk for this application, I'd say there's two streams of thought on that. There's one where, and this actually gets into more high level design aspects of it, is if you've ever been at design meetings with the architect in early in project phases, there's actually considerations for risk and stop loss and how you can protect your envelope. So what you'll see with a lot of newer buildings in that aspect is you'll see more curves in the design, because from a sensory perception, and like you feel safer when there's less edges there, because you could, as they said, like a security consultant would say, you can see a threat before sooner, so you're not going to be as big of a risk that way. Having said that, there's no change in that risk per se, because it's you're not changing the curvature of it. There were some concerns about the tinting getting too dark originally, but we haven't had any issues with that. As far as breaking and entering concerns, there's no higher risk to that than there would be from doing traditional glazing. And then lastly, one of the other issues we've historically had with the water tower building as well, just the way it's shaped, we've actually had a lot of issues with birds flying into the windows when they were when the single pane ones were still there, because they were too dark, or sorry, they were too light. But having the additional tinting there has actually reduced that. We still had to put the stickers. I'm sure other owner groups have seen those, where you have to put the bird stickers or some kind of way so they can see it, so they don't fly into it. But we haven't, I would say, weakened our security to the building or any of the security for the windows doing it that way. And then for the solar shade components, I saw that was, I think that was asked about it as well. That starts getting into being more application specific. And I think that's where having the right project team early on becomes useful, because with some glazing applications, and if you've ever worked with building envelope consultants, they'll talk about storefront glazing. You can start having some water ingression problems, and you might not actually be able to use this product in some situations because you can't detail it properly. But that's where having the experts engaged early on so they can advise you is critical, so that when you start getting to all your vapor barrier testing, water testing, all that fun stuff on building envelope commissioning, you're not setting yourself for, you're not setting yourself up for failure that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another question, what is the cost per square foot comparison for intelligent versus standard glazing?
Yes, money. Everyone always wants to know money.
It's important.
It is. I guess to reiterate, one of the points I had from lessons learned is, yes, you are going to have a cost premium in going towards dynamic glazing, because there is additional labor to bring the low voltage cables to the windows. And there's also the additional commissioning aspect of it. To get into the actual material cost, it's hard for me to answer that, because I am presenting from a Canadian environment, and I know most of the people in the conference are in the US. So like, we have other factors like the exchange rate, just the fact that it's, I think this one was manufactured in California. So there's a bunch of additional costs that we had. I know the price point is going down as adoption goes up, but we had about a 20% incremental, but I don't want to give that number as verbatim, just because of all these other factors that we had at play in a Canadian environment.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that I don't often hear. So I appreciate you raising that. So does each window require its own photocell?
For the photocell question and how many you actually need, we only had the one photocell for both projects. We tend to put it on the south side as best as we could. So we only needed the one photocell per application.
Okay. And how long does it take to tint or adjust?
Yes, how long does it take to tint or adjust? That's another great question. It's this is more of a visual comfort issue. With ours, they're set for about 15 minutes right now, so it's not an abrupt change. So it's if you're in the office and you're doing work, you hardly notice it because the change happens so gradually. But yeah, 15 minutes. It's if you're sitting there doing work, you can't even notice it.
Excellent. So kind of like a well-planned daylighting scenario with the Luminaire slowly adjusting. So what would a smart window be most effective on east, south, and west facing windows? Like, which of your orientations is the best application?
Well, it depends what side of the hemisphere you're on. I think would be the best way to start with that. But yeah, that's a great question, and it's to do with solar orientation as well. Being on the northern side of the hemisphere there, I would say having this on your south-facing glazing would be the most bang for your buck, so to speak. When we did the water tower building, we did the entire building just from an aesthetic standpoint, because we wanted to match the look all around. But with the pilot project we only did that on the south side. If you're looking for, I guess in the northern hemisphere scenario, if you're trying to look for ways to implement this, so you're improving your climate resiliency, but also try to be cost conscious about it, doing your south facing would be the best way, and then kind of going with your traditional low E double pane thermally broken on the other windows would probably give you the most bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Bill says, great idea. How did this impact the operation of zone controls, VAV boxes, etc.? And was there more hunting or was there more tuning for the zones for stability?
In terms of zone control stability and how it impacted our HVAC system, I would say we didn't really notice too much, but also this building in particular has a pretty old HVAC system in there. It has a multi-zone unit, so it was there wasn't as much of a hunting issue as you would have with, say, like a VAV box. I mean, I wouldn't say there was any additional, I guess, tuning growing pains with it. But one thing that the system has that we didn't utilize is there is a backnet gateway for the view glass product, but we didn't install that because of some of the limitations on our network infrastructure, which we are upgrading right now. But I guess to answer that more concisely, there was no additional issues with zone tuning as a result of the product.
Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned earlier it's important to bring in an expert early in the process. Are there experts out there, enough of them, that if you're in a competitive nature, say you're a public project, can you still achieve that goal?
Yes. So bringing an expert in early on, that would be getting like a building science firm or a building envelope consultant. I'm sure people in the Pacific Northwest, they've all had experience with leaky condos and what that was like over the last 20 years. So there's been a whole kind of industry that's kind of sprung up to address this issue. So it's for some of our local firms here, and I think they might have offices in Seattle as well. Firms like RDH or MH and companies like that, this is sort of like they specialize in doing details like this, and having them on your team early on so they can advise you if this is a good project to do. I think that'll be critical, but it's there's so many things that can go wrong with Windows. Just please make sure you do get them involved early.
Yep. Good advice. So Fred asks where he can get more information on this system. So was it in your slides, kind of that resources page that'll be available on the website?
Yeah, it's I just put the vendor's website on one of the slide decks there. It's let me just double check my notes here. I think it was view.com or view.inc, but if you search View Incorporated online, it will come up. But yeah, it will be in the slide proceedings as well. So
great. Well, it looks like we should probably keep moving on. We have 3 more presenters that are going to talk about some additional case studies. So thank you so much, Travis. I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing this new technology with us.
my pleasure.
Great. So our next presenters today are Cynthia Eichner and John Petosa. Cynthia currently serves as the Director of Community Development for HopeWorks Social Enterprises in Everett. And I think once we get into the Q&A, I'll ask both of them to give just a little bit more of an intro so that we can expand on that a little bit. So thank you so much. Looking forward to your presentation.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here today and share with you a little bit of information about what we're doing to talk to residents in our affordable housing property in Washington State about energy conservation and environmentally sustainable behaviors. It might be good just to get to know a little bit about who we are and what we do first. And that's where the story begins. HopeWorks is an affiliate of a nonprofit called Housing Hope, which has been in the business of providing affordable housing developments in Snohomish County, Washington, which is just about 15 miles north of the greater Seattle area in Washington state. And we have 22 affordable housing developments, of which the one that I'm speaking to you about today, Hopeworks Station North, Station Place, is really the premier development of the whole property portfolio. The best way to describe what we are doing here is it is really a demonstration program. It opened its doors on October 2019, and we became fully occupied with residents on December 31st at literally about 10:53 p.m. before the new year started, 2020. The concept around what we do at Hopeworks Station Place is really about addressing three primary societal issues. The first is that we want to provide affordable housing. The second is that we're combining workforce development programs. And the third is that the building itself was constructed around being a showcase for what a building can be, especially affordable housing building can be, around environmental sustainability. This is a great shot of the exterior of our building. It is designed with a first floor being where our social enterprise business, Kindred Kitchen Cafe, is located, with the floors that you see with the windows being our residential floors, floors 2, 3, and 4. This is a look at what the community at large is. We are next to the Puget Sound in Washington State, coastal area, Navy, strong Navy presence in the community, and a growing suburb, and it is the largest city, Everett, Washington, in Snohomish County. So who lives at Hopeworks? I think this is a wonderful depiction of what the demographics are within the community. It is not a typical community in that it is a combination of primarily homeless individuals and families who have moved into an apartment. We have 1, 2, and studio apartments within the building. What you're about to see now is a slide that we've prepared for our touchscreen in our lobby that tells the story. This depicts a really nice slide that talks about the resident and the composition of residents that we have living in 65 apartment units at Hopeworks Station Place. 15 of those apartments are dedicated to youth, 18 to 24. 10 are allocated to veterans, and 10 are participants in our family drug treatment program who are working to re-engage with their family members that have been separated primarily due to drug addiction issues. We have 23 that are for other homeless populations, and 8 that have been dedicated to those who are low income and getting vouchers to live in affordable apartments. This is an interior shot that looks at the courtyard area of the development, and you can see already some of the features that are environmentally sustainability. We have a courtyard with a garden area. All of the units are facing into the center, and that's done deliberately to promote community and engagement among residents. This is an actual picture of one of our units that is comprised of all ultra-high energy efficient appliances, low flow toilets, and lighting that is very, very eco-friendly in terms of use of energy. Within each of these units is a system and a temperature thermostat that controls temperature and obviously is connected to an eGauge energy monitoring system. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So this really relates and gets now into the environmental sustainability section. This is a top rendering view and pretty close to what it does look like for all of our, the units on the top on the 4th floor are all the solar panels. And the goal here is to be net zero in terms of being able to have all of our energy for the building, including use in our commercial space, which is our kitchen, and all of the energy that is used by our residents to be provided by 532 solar panels that cover our rooftop and parking canopy. And so basically what we're doing is we're trying to produce 105% of our residential energy use from these solar panels. It's about green living here, and our intention purposefully was to begin to foster sustainable living habits in our staff, residents, and our community. And this is actually a touchscreen panel that is in our lobby, and that will come up in just a second. But you can see that we've dedicated sections and areas of interest where people can learn more about energy, solar, and recycling and waste efforts that we have at Station Place. This is actually the touch screen, and what's really cool about this is that on the top screen is where you can actually see on an hourly level and an hourly gauge how much energy is being produced by the building and how that equates to mileage saved and some really cool statistics that get at why it's important and how much we're generating and how much we're using. And that is ongoing 24/7, and we leave that on all day. A duplicate of that screen is also in what's called our resident hallway. There are 2 entrances to the building. This is the main building entrance, and the residents will also have a screen that shows energy uses as well as reminders about how to conserve energy and general information about resources available to them, as well as things like when to pay rent and all that good stuff. This is another depiction of a slide that talks about what we're all about at HopeWorks. And again, the #1 goal is to produce the energy on site and work to reduce our energy consumption through education, incentives, and tracking. So how does all this happen, and what are the steps that you take to build community? And this is really what the goal is. Residents who come into our building, we encourage them to participate in programs that will lift them out of poverty. And they also, when they come into the building, are made fully aware of the sustainability features within the building. But because of a number of things that have happened, starting at the first of the year with a couple of floods that we had, and then with COVID and our state self-quarantining, we have been in a place now where we are now just beginning to re-engage with our residents and move forward with our plan on energy education, training, and participation. This is an example of our plan, just a little snippet of what our sustainability implementation timeline is. And we're hoping to fully engage and begin that work in July. And the first piece of the puzzle for our residents is to help them understand how to program a thermostat. But every month we look at seasonal topics or seasonal topics that relate to work that we can do. We can engage them through trainings, through meetings, through all kinds of communications that we've developed, including door hangers and incentives that we are currently developing to encourage them to be responsible stewards of energy. We've actually divided the training into every single piece that is seen on the paper to your right. So we have video that accompanies every single step in order on how to program an individual unit thermostat.
All right, We're going to set the time on the thermostat, which is the first step to doing any thermostat programming, because if you haven't set the time, none of your other programming will work. So you start by holding the P button for 3 seconds. And then it'll beep like that. And then the little day of the week will flash somewhere along the top. Right now it says Monday, but it should be Sunday. So we're going to press the down arrow. Now it says Sunday, so we press the next arrow. We set the hour, should be 12, so press that arrow. And then it's actually 12:26, so we press the next arrow and press the up to make it 12:26. And then we press this arrow again, and we're done.
And there you go. Obviously, we are looking at how we're going to track energy use against a goal. And right now, because of a number of challenges that we've had ever since our residents moved in January, we had 2 floods where we actually had to relocate 11 individuals and families living in 11 units. It was during the winter. And we had to have a lot of extensive repair done, including lots of those big fans that, soak up the water and do things like that. So you can see from here that we have not totally been able to meet our goals since we started tracking in January. We anticipate now that we are going to be able to launch our resident engagement program, beginning with the instructions on how to program thermostats, track it for a couple of months, and then be able to show net zero positive or net zero energy use moving forward. This is a terribly complicated slide, but what I really would like you to pay attention to is that by using eGauge, we can actually track energy use by unit. And in this particular case, we can track it by all our studios, all of our 1 bedrooms, and all of our 2 bedrooms. The color coordination that you see here really indicates which units are performing well, which would be green, which ones are right on the border of going over energy use, and which ones are extremely high in using energy use. This is going to help us develop incentive programs. For example, we might want to look at having a competition between all 1 bedrooms in terms of who can have the best energy readings for the month. It also is an opportunity to do further and deeper education to find out why they might be using more energy, and to do some triaging with the residents themselves to determine what best they can do to improve the use of the energy and give them tools to do that. I think keeping in mind in all of this is that our resident composition, especially among our homeless residents, is that these people have moved directly from living in a shelter, from living in their cars, from living on couches. And so understanding how to use a thermostat or even understanding in some cases how to use appliances is not something that they are comfortable with or have been familiar with in doing. So we know that this is a long-term project, and we hope to start beginning that work again, as I said, in July. I think that wraps it up for me. I am so thrilled to be here and to partner with Snohomish Public Utility District on this work. They have been invaluable in working with us, in giving us opportunities to work with them on incentive programs and to reuse those monies to help offset energy costs for our residents, as well as provide opportunities to help us in our training and education efforts. Thanks for letting me be here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Cynthia, that was very, very interesting and inspirational. I love seeing what you can accomplish when everyone's working together in a common goal like that. I see that you're joined by John, and I don't know, John, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, my name is John Petosa. I was the account manager that worked with Housing Hope and Hope Works during the construction process. I've been at the utility for 12 years, and formerly I operated restaurants for 30 years. So not only was I the account manager, I was also on the culinary advisory committee since its inception there at Housing Hope. So I've been involved with these guys for quite a while.
Wonderful, wonderful. Would you like to speak just a little bit about how that early engagement not only affected the outcome of the project, but also how it helped kind of you to have that consistent pathway through the whole project timeline?
So I think that's the challenge we face all the time. Is so often as a utility we get involved, project is already downstream quite a bit, and it's hard to have an effect or really be able to help the customer. I sat through probably 2 years of meetings with the design team and having a really deep understanding of what the owners and the Housing Hope and the direction they wanted to go, and I could take that back to the district so that we could really assist and service for our customer to help them get to where they wanted to be. We were able to come up with new construction is a challenge in our programs because of the high energy codes in Washington. And we were able to come up with a unique program here for new construction based on the modeling of the building that one of our engineers was able to come up with. We also were able to come up with a pilot rate for the low income or the net zero building that we didn't have in place before. So just being involved so early allowed us to have those conversations and get our different groups there at the district involved, whether it was distribution and how to get power to the building and how to connect all that solar on top to the rates group. So it was really a rewarding project, I think.
Wonderful. I was going to ask you that might be the most solar I've seen on a roof in a long, long time. That's pretty impressive amounts of solar. Was that a tough sell, Cynthia and John? How did you help make that happen?
Well, I think part of it, I can speak to what I've learned. I've been with the organization just about 9 months now, and a great deal of this vision came from the chief strategy officer, who was the former CEO, and his vision was always about how to be an innovator in our community and try things that nobody else has really tried. And it's pretty unheard of that a nonprofit, an affordable housing project, would take on something of this magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say vision number one. And secondly, we were also able to get a grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce, and I believe it was about $750,000. And that helped us purchase that solar array. But we saw the vision, and we saw that nobody else was doing it. And I think we knew we had strong partners with Snowpud who could work with us on the development of this building to make it happen. So I would just say it was a strong push. It was built on great support and relationships and a real commitment to being a leader in environmental sustainability in the greater Everett area. I think that was really a strong point.
Yep.
So, and I would add in that whole area right there. I'd add in just a little bit more. That whole area right there is an older industrial area, and Ed's vision is who Cynthia is talking about, was to create a corridor to really change that environment where people live and provide a place where people could live close to our train station and our bus depot down there. So this project is really the first project in a neighborhood that they hope to revitalize over the next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it takes. And I think what else is unique when you look at the solar, this is one of 2 net zero projects in Everett. And both those projects were competing for funds, and they were actually able to work out together where they were able to partner on some of these grants and split them so that nobody had to go without. I think that's really a unique partnership amongst nonprofits. So that was really cool, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a question, and I think maybe, Cynthia, this one's for you. What challenges have you faced in community outreach efforts with low income and homeless populations?
Well, I think that the challenge is to walk in with your eyes wide open in terms of understanding what your population is experiencing just as individuals. In other words, where did they come from? What have they has their experience been? And we actually did a pretty extensive kind of move-in survey to find out what their level of understanding was about environmental sustainability. We know about their backgrounds. Many of them don't have above a high school education. So they're coming in, in terms of understanding and challenge in education, not having that background. And literally, I was here a lot of that night when we were getting most of our residents registered and ready to move in. They were literally coming out of their cars. They had been living in shelters. So the understanding of being a responsible utility payer and understanding a lot about the components of the building, it was fairly limited. And so it's meeting people where they are, which I think is a real big message on what we're doing. But we've also did some really good pre-work before the building opened in establishing a sustainability advisory board in our community who helped us kind of carve out what we thought we would be able to do. And we built a very comprehensive resident manual that has an extensive section on sustainability. We're now in the process of revising that and potentially making it digital, because what we do is that most of our residents are capable of using smartphones and download videos from YouTube, which is why, for example, we did a video on how to program your thermostat, because they might use that medium and understand that better than actually reading a piece, even though we try to take it down to at least a sixth grade reading level. We're trying to use the technology that they have and combine the two and bring it to a more reasonable expectation and level of understanding. And lastly, I just say the green team that we've just established is comprised of residents. So we learned that our residents do care about the environment. They do see the value of wanting to learn more, and they do care about the future of their children and their community. So we're walking in with some good positive energy, no pun intended, but letting that really fully fan out and beginning that work actually starting in mid-July to bring them back together again and begin to roll out that schedule of programming and adapt it to their needs.
That's wonderful. You mentioned the home space into the courtyard to help build that sense of community. And so it sounds like you're just figuring out ways to incorporate all these values within that sense of community and make it, and the pride of the project. I was curious. You showed the color coded kind of the different residents and kind of where they were on their scale of efficiency. Is that something that's available for everyone to see? Can all residents see that? Or
that'll be a big part of our first meeting, is really explaining what the eGauge system can do. And every single unit will be provided with their own URL address. So we will teach them how to track their energy use on their phone or their computers, and they can actually see how well they're doing. They won't be able to see how other neighbors are doing. We will. And so if we see, for example, why are all the one-bedroom units, up or down, then we can connect with them individually and talk with them about it. We can learn more about how many people might be in the one-bedroom unit, where there might be 3 people in a one-bedroom unit, and there might be a one-bedroom with 2 people in it or 1 person in it, and one might have 2 small children. So, all of these things have to go into the mix to determine and really kind of triage, as I had mentioned earlier, each individual scenario. And we realize that we have to build up the base of volunteers within that resident community to be willing to talk with their other fellow residents about how they can help each other in this area, and to rely on some of our volunteers from our sustainability advisory committee to serve as volunteers and mentors to help them, and bring in our social services team and our property management staff to really come at it from all angles and help them. So that's really the goal.
Yep. Yep, it really does take a village, doesn't it?
Yes.
So can you tell us more about I think this would be for you, Dan. Can you tell us more about the restaurant training program and how that works to build the skills of the residents?
There you go. John, you can take it. You know a lot about it.
Or John, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the idea, it started originally at HopeWorks 1, Station 1, where they built a barista program to take teenagers and unemployed and come in and teach them a skill that they take outside and move on. And I think can't remember whether it's a 6 or 8 week program. And now that they've moved into Kindred Cafe, there's a whole set of training where they actually work in the back and they work their way through the program until they get up in the front of the house. So they'll learn knife skills, customer service skills, just life skills, because so many of these young kids have either been on the street, how to show up for work, how to dress for work, how to be on time, little things that a lot of people take for granted. And I'm trying to remember it. We've been a little bit off schedule because of the COVID-19, so it really didn't get kicked off the way they wanted it to. But I think their goals, they move. And Cynthia, you probably know this better than I do. Is it a 16-week program?
Yeah, I think it's a little less than that. I think it's a 12 to 13 week.
Okay.
But right now our goal between all of the 3 social enterprises is to get about 50 to 75 participants a year through those programs. I think that'll be very challenging in this new world that we live in. But we are doing some innovative things around some virtual trainings, especially on the culinary side. We're actually sending materials home to the interns, and they are being asked to prepare what we give them or drop on their doorstep, and take a picture of it and then send the completed project. So we're trying to use the challenges that we face to do some training virtually. And we hope to be able to bring our interns back on site here in the next couple of weeks. And probably a combination of both virtual and on-site training will begin as Washington proceeds to go through the stages of reopening and what's safe for us to do.
Yep. That's nice that you're finding ways to keep the momentum even during these challenging times. So what does continuing engagement look like with turnover of tenants?
Well, I would tell you that I would say that this property does not have a deadline in terms of you can only live here for X number of months before you need to move on. The apartments are fairly small. They range from about 325 square feet to, I think the max is around 626. So they're fairly small. The other interesting demographic that we have is about 40% of our resident population is comprised of children under the age of 5. So we have a very large single family presence with 1 to 2 children who are anywhere from 2 months old to 3 years old. And so I would say that perhaps for those scenarios, we might see some turnover as housing opens up that provides greater space for them. But it is not an unheard of scenario that residents will likely stay in our property, and most of our properties for more than 1 to 2 years before they move on and move up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I guess, in answer to your question, the goal is to really teach them skills so that when they move onward and upward, regardless if they're moving to another level of affordable housing, they're still going to be responsible for paying utility bills. They may not always get the discounts that they're receiving now, but the point is to teach them energy behaviors that will last a lifetime. And we believe that there are definitely a population worth saving and teaching these skills, because we want them to be responsible and productive, and to be engaged civically in their communities. So we hope that we can provide them a solid foundation moving forward. But we'll see how, as things come back to more normal, whether we will have a turnover rate, but it's not extremely high in our properties.
Mm-hmm. And can the lessons learned here in this project be used for future designs within, or future projects within Everett? Are you seeing any
Yes.
transferability to other projects? Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that?
We're actually now in a place where we are beginning to obviously record some of our best practices and our key learnings, and partner with our Housing Hope associates to operationalize the cost and the investment worth the return. Excuse me. So we have two Vista volunteers that are going to be working, one on my side and one on the Housing Hope side, that are going to be working on an integration plan on how some of our properties can be retrofitted and what should be done first to help them be not only better building structurally in terms of energy and cost savings and what needs to be done first, but also on future development. This program is the demonstration of what we want, hopefully, our new developments to be. And so what we learn here, we hope will be able to significantly provide an imprint into the future of what is developed moving forward in the Snohomish County, Island County area.
Wonderful.
And I just like to add that from the utility perspective, with the focus on fossil fuels and electrification, it was really important for us in a great pilot project to understand how we could incorporate this into our service area. So it's been a great learning experience, and we hope that it continues for a long time. So
Wonderful. Cynthia, I think this question is for you. How many partnerships did Housing Hope have to forge to make this building come to fruition?
A lot. I joined about 1 month before this new building opened. And I have begun to learn more and more about the numerous people that were engaged in the process from the beginning and the start of all of this. We had several partners, architectural firms, and as John mentioned, literally sitting at tables and learning more about the work that they did from the start. So I couldn't give you an exact number, but I can just tell you that there were a lot of people who came together and really saw the vision and saw the opportunity to make this a very special place. The one thing I will add as an addition that I wasn't able to announce is that we've just received a LEED Platinum certification for the building. And that is
Hooray.
I believe, the first in Snohomish County and or perhaps just only Everett, but I believe it's the first in Snohomish County. We'll double check that, but we just got notice probably a few days after I submitted the PowerPoint and ready to go. So this is a big darn deal for our community, and we're hoping to tell more of that story moving forward.
That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, we have a question here from Tom, and this one is a little bit in my wheelhouse, in that I work with new construction projects down in Oregon. So, what technical assistance and incentives did the utility provide to support the design and construction of the facility?
yeah, hi Tom. So because of our early involvement in this, we had a good idea where they wanted to go, and they had done a modeling of what they thought the building would run at. So Rob, the engineer that was assigned to this, came up with a unique way to look at it, and we were able to provide an incentive based on the modeling over code, and it actually has a range. We paid part of that incentive at the beginning, and then we will do a performance-based payment on how well the building operates. So it was really unique, and Rod did a fantastic job of coming up with that, and it worked for the utility and the customer.
Great. Anything to add, Cynthia? On that
No,
one?
I think that's the big piece. As I said, I was able to join after all the heavy lifting was done. And my job is primarily around delivering and incorporating a culture that's built around, learning energy behaviors and really meeting our goals. We are currently also working with ILFI on and have been given the opportunity to participate in the Living Building Challenge. And we would be the first to do that if we achieve that goal. And much of it is predicated on the net zero work that we need to do in terms of energy. So we're working on the 3 petals: energy, beauty, and place, and hope to be able to kick off our 12-month countdown here, hopefully in the fall.
Wow, that's also exciting.
Yeah.
So there's a question. There's a question here about the HVAC for the units. How do you know the specific HVAC makeup? Is it mini splits? Is it cooling towers? Is it HVAC per unit, or is it done kind of more on a building wide basis?
I might defer to my partner, who might know the answer to that question before I do.
And I would defer to Rob if Rob was available, but I do not know that.
I don't know it either, but we can get back to you.
Okay, well, it was tough to tell. There were so many solar panels on the roof. You couldn't really see what was going on up there with mechanical systems, which is not a bad thing. So can this or other sites like this be used for demonstrating new technologies for reducing energy use in the future?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that's the intent.
I think that was one of Ed's visions, that he wanted to build build a building that other people could look at and say this works.
Yeah, it sounds like not only as a demonstration project for the for the community, but even broader, perhaps now with the Living Future Challenge, it could inspire throughout the country and potentially even the world. So that's wonderful. So Richard says, yes, great presentation. So thank you, Richard. So Cynthia and John, do you have any closing comments before we move on to Holly?
I would just say, if you're go ahead, Cynthia.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, your utility is really there to help, and reach out early and get them involved. If they have an account management team, they can help with everything from getting connected to programs that might be available. So the earlier, the better.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I said, it's the planning up front that's the most critical in any kind of project that you do. And when you get the players around the table who can really add energy and perspective and insight and knowledge, that's where the magic happens. And it's just something that we're very proud of, and we hope to continue our work moving forward and to help lead the way in what can truly be done to change the outcomes of folks that are working out of poverty, but do it in a way that's really, really environmentally conscious and is an example to how others can do the same.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. I think I speak for the audience in that it's not only inspirational, but it's absolutely critical to see these projects that can become milestones and demonstration projects for future. So thank you so much. Well, our final presenter today is Holly Gaston. Holly is an energy manager at CBRE, and she develops energy and water efficiency, solar, and utility rate management programs for her clients. So Holly, feel free to add a little bit more to your introduction when we move to your Q&A, but I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Hi, my name is Holly Gaston, and I'm an energy manager with a commercial real estate consulting company called CBRE. My role is essentially to find energy and water management initiatives to improve sustainability and reduce costs for my clients. In this presentation, I'm going to share examples of low and no cost initiatives that have worked for my team. As context, the pandemic has tightened budget environments for many companies, which heightens the focus on cost-saving initiatives. While energy and water management initiatives often have both a sustainability and a cost-saving impact, they usually require an upfront investment, which can be difficult to get in these times. So since funding is limited, we as energy managers can shift our focus to the many no and low cost opportunities that are available for us so we can continue to make an impact in this environment. This presentation shares case studies of initiatives that avoid a significant upfront cost because either the vendor is paid on an ongoing basis from the monthly savings, or because there are operational changes that can be implemented at no cost, like operational HVAC or water savings. There are 4 initiatives that I plan to discuss, including shared savings LED lighting retrofits, correcting operational water and HVAC problems, procuring lower rates for electricity in deregulated states, and participating in a utility bill audit and finding billing errors and opportunities for lower rates. So first up is LED lighting retrofits. I manage this LED lighting retrofit program for a group of cancer treatment clinics. These photos show examples of the clinics so you can see what this looks like. There were 3 in Texas, 2 in Colorado, and 1 in Minnesota. The clinics are relatively small, ranging from about 13,000 to 32,000 square feet. Typically, upgrades like this would need to be approved in the annual budget, but we started our energy management program partway through the budget year, so we didn't want to wait a whole year to get started. And also, if we waited for the annual budget submission period, the program still might not get approved because it would have to compete against all of the other budget priorities for the clinics that year. So for this reason, we instead partnered with a company that provides what's sometimes called energy savings as a service. Essentially, our program partner would purchase the lighting on our behalf, and then we would repay the cost over time out of the monthly savings. So to visualize this, I've added this figure on the left. Before the program, the clinics essentially made standard monthly payments to the utility company for their electricity. After the new lighting was installed, they continued to make their monthly payment to the utility, but it was reduced given the savings from the more efficient lighting. I've made the utility payment bar narrower in the after part of the diagram just to visualize this, to show the lower utility costs. A significant portion of the electricity savings now go to our program partner to repay the cost of the lighting. So that's represented by that middle bar, the payment to the lighting partner. There's also a small portion of the savings, which is typically 10% for these projects, that's kept by the clinics. So once the lighting costs are repaid, which they're paid through a monthly invoice, the payment to the lighting partner will disappear and the clinics will keep 100% of the savings going forward. So at that point, the savings bar at the bottom will take up the whole space. That now includes the payment to the lighting partner. I put together this table just to show you how this has worked out for the 6 clinics. Depending on the efficiency of their existing lighting, the savings ranged from 5 to 17% in terms of their electricity use reduction. When we translate that to a sustainability impact, it comes to the equivalent of removing about 67 cars from the road. An additional benefit of this savings as a service model is that the provider is responsible for the performance of the lighting. So there's a warranty in place for each of the sites until the lighting cost is paid off. So in other words, if a lamp burns out during the period before the lighting is paid off, the clinics can request a replacement lamp at no cost. This was actually the reason why the last clinic in this list participated in the program. They had T5 lighting, which was relatively efficient, so the energy savings from upgrading to LEDs weren't that great. But their lamps burned out continually, probably because of a ballast compatibility issue. And this resulted in high lamp replacement costs for them. And also their spaces were dimly lit if they didn't keep up with the need to replace the lighting. So now with the lighting upgrade, they can have higher lighting quality, and they've also eliminated their cost to replacement lamps. Depending on the upgrade costs and savings, the time required to pay back the lighting costs varies for these clinics from 6.5 years to just under 10 years for the participating sites. During the repayment period, most of the sites keep 10% of the energy savings, followed by 100% once the costs are repaid. Next up is looking at operational water and HVAC opportunities. Operational problems are cases in which a building is using more water or energy than it needs to, but not because the equipment is less efficient than it could be, like in the case of the LED lighting retrofits we were just discussing, but rather because it's malfunctioning or it's running at times that it doesn't need to be. It may be running after hours, or a part may be broken. There are various things that can contribute to it, and it's sort of a mystery to figure out exactly what it is. That's part of what's interesting about looking into these opportunities. Another exciting part of looking into these opportunities is that fixing them is often free or very inexpensive. A key place to start is to benchmark your buildings. This essentially means comparing all the buildings by efficiency to figure out which ones are performing in the least efficient manner, so you can figure out where to prioritize your discoveries. A popular free tool for this is Energy Star Portfolio Manager. You can also do this with a number of utility bill pay programs. Once you've ranked your buildings by efficiency, you can essentially see if there are outliers or ones that are particularly inefficient, and start with those. Another useful strategy is to track significant increases in energy use over time, because this can help you identify problems right when they start. So to do this, in my portfolio, I've set up alerts in our utility bill pay portal. So if utility bills come in that have usage greater than 25% of the usage for the same month the prior year, then it gets flagged and moved to a list of variances that I periodically review. Once you've found a potential issue, either through benchmarking or through studying unusual usage increases, it's best to review interval data if you have it available. Interval data is usage data recorded on 15, 30, or 60-minute intervals, and it gives you a complete picture of how the building uses energy over the course of a day, which can help you zero in on scheduling issues like HVAC running on nights and weekends. I've included a few examples here of operational problems that I found in my clients' buildings to show you what this can look like. The first is a problem that I found through benchmarking. My client's utility bill pay system includes a benchmarking tool that compares buildings' energy by electricity per square foot, or EUI. I used it to compare the efficiency of buildings with similar characteristics, like buildings in the same business unit or buildings of the same type. And there are many more sophisticated programs for benchmarking that take into account more variables, but even just this simple approach, it gives you useful information. So in this case, I found that the least efficient building, which in this chart is the one that's marked with the blue arrow, so at the far right side, the least efficient building used almost twice as much electricity per square foot as the next least efficient building. So there's definitely something going on with this space that we need to figure out. So unfortunately, interval data is not available for this building, so I didn't have a way to zoom in and see what was happening with their energy use over the course of a day. So instead, I spoke to the site team and the property manager, and also the construction team that had managed a renovation of the space the previous summer. And I learned that this is an office suite in a multi-tenant building, and the landlord actually has additional space in the building outside of our suite, but some of it is on our meter. And so although that space is vacant, the landlord was actually conditioning it still, and it was conditioned to about 70 degrees 24/7. So that was a contributor to why we saw such high electricity use per square foot at this building, because it's actually conditioning additional space. We're working toward a long-term solution still, but in the interim, the landlord has stopped conditioning the vacant space, and I'm awaiting the next bill to see how that goes. These operational opportunities aren't limited to HVAC though, and water is another good opportunity to look at. One of the cancer treatment clinics had particularly high water use, and so I found that a common cause of water use spikes at these clinics is a malfunction in the cooling system of the radiation treatment machines. And so for that reason, I reached out to the site team and I asked if they could check the cooling system because the water use was higher than for the other clinics. And it did turn out that a valve controlling the water flow had been left slightly open, which is similar to a giant running toilet. And so it was causing a continual water loss. The technician who checked the machine was able to close the valve and the water use dropped back to normal levels. And so here in the chart, you can see that where on the left side, we have the water use before the change. And then the drop occurs in July, which is the one marked valve closed. And then after that, you have a new water usage pattern, which is more typical for these cancer treatment clinics. So the water savings from this change, which is it's a free change, just closing the valve, are enough to fill about 2 Olympic swimming pools per year. And in terms of cost savings, it comes to about $16,000. That's kind of exciting because these are measures that are pretty low lift. It just requires some digging to find out what's causing the patterns you're seeing. The last operational case study I'd like to share is a more classic HVAC scheduling issue. So in this case, the site was using more electricity this year than it was the year before. And to figure out what was going on, I downloaded hourly data from the electricity company and ran some analyses in ECAM, which is a free tool offered by Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I'd recommend checking out ECAM if you're getting started with interval data analysis because it's a free program and it allows you to see more of the detail to investigate these anomalies. ECAM helps you view the electricity load profile, which is how electricity is used over the course of a day. So in this slide, the chart at the middle bottom is the chart from ECAM. And essentially the x-axis shows you the time of day, and it ranges from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. And then the y-axis shows the electricity use. So you can see generally the building has a lower level of usage in the early morning hours until it hits what looks like business hours, and then it goes up and is elevated throughout the day, likely due to air conditioning the space. And then it tapers off in the evening and goes back to the unoccupied setting. ECAM allows you to compare these average load profiles over the course of a month with the same month the prior year. So that's what I'm showing here in this chart. And specifically, the orange line represents this year, and then the blue line represents last year. So what we're looking at is a significant increase this year over last year. And I've also filtered in ECAM to show only weekends. So this is specifically a weekend increase. When I looked at weekdays, it was pretty similar year over year. So it looks like the increase that we're observing in the billing data is primarily coming from this weekend behavior. This isn't necessarily a mistake. It could be that the building is now operating on the weekend, and so they need to condition it like this. But in this case, I discussed it with the facilities team, and I found out that they weren't operating on the weekend. So we were able to find out that it was being conditioned but didn't need to be. And so they were able to change it so that the building is now running in unoccupied mode on the weekends again. The reduction is easy to see in the charts when you look into the data, so it's kind of neat to see. In this case, the top chart is from the utility company website, and it just shows each blue column is 1 hour, and the time scale is about a couple weeks actually. And so during the course of a day, the electricity use starts low because it's coming out of the nighttime setback. Then it increases during the day as we're air conditioning. This is in Arizona, so there's a lot of air conditioning use. And then it goes back down afterward. So each of these peaks represents one day. I've highlighted in yellow the weekend before the change and the weekend after the change so that you can see the difference. And so essentially the weekend right before the change, the days appeared similar to weekdays. They were slightly lower, but basically it was showing the same pattern. After the change, those peaks were removed. So we're now saving that energy because we're not air conditioning. Overall, this change is expected to reduce the building's electricity use by about 7%, which comes to about $19,000 per year. So it's another one that looking into these scheduling issues is it's a bit of a mystery solving exercise, but it's something that is usually free or quite inexpensive to solve once you find the problem. All right, so the first two examples I've discussed focused on finding ways to reduce energy or water use, but the next two are going to focus instead on ways to optimize rates. A key way to optimize electricity rates is through competitive electricity procurement in deregulated states where this is allowed. And I've listed in this table the states that fall into this category. In these states, companies can choose their electricity supplier, so you can essentially comparison shop to find the best terms or the best price that you want. Agreeing to terms and rates essentially comes in the form of an electricity supply contract, which will specify the electricity price or the electricity pricing structure and the term length, which can vary from a few months to several years, so it's pretty flexible. It'll also include which meters are covered by the contract and their expected loads. It's possible to specify in an electricity contract that the electricity purchased come from renewable sources. So these contracts can either be for standard brown power or they can be for renewable energy. The electricity market varies constantly as demand and supply change. So one of the key drivers is actually the weather. For example, in the summer, the electricity pricing is often higher because demand for air conditioning increases with hot weather, and then more electricity needs to be supplied. The increased demand causes pricing to rise. Prices can also be affected by power plants coming online or offline, or expectations about that happening, political events. There are really many factors that go into it. And to obtain optimal rates, it's best to track the market and execute your electricity contract when the market is low, even if that's not when your electricity contract expires. So a key thing about the electricity contracting process is that you can contract at any time. You would just set your start date for your contract into the future if you're on an electricity contract that is still going. So you can set a future start date, but still take advantage of lower pricing when the market is low. So for my clients, I keep track of my clients' buildings that are in deregulated states and then work with an electricity procurement advisor who's within my company for advice on electricity market conditions and also to facilitate contract renewals. And so when the market conditions are favorable, we request pricing bids from a number of suppliers, and then we complete new contracts with the supplier that provides the most competitive bid. Electricity contract pricing is also only good for a few hours, so the process requires a very quick turnaround on the day that you're going to transact, which is something that I found is the most challenging aspect of this particular initiative, because you often have to have somebody from somebody else in your company sign off on the contract. So in my case, I need the client to sign off on the contract. So we need to get pricing, review the contract, make sure all the terms are correct, the right buildings are included, they have the right dates. All of these are issues that are often correct, but I found mistakes on some contracts. So it's important to review them, but then you have to do that and then get approval and get someone else to sign all within the space of a few hours. So that's a tricky part about this kind of initiative. I just wanted to show you an example of what this can look like. So this is a case study of a contract we completed earlier this year. It's a warehouse in Pennsylvania, and it had been purchasing electricity from the utility, which is the default approach if a different supplier hasn't already been chosen. So we completed the bid process and obtained a significantly lower price for the building by combining it with other buildings that were also in Pennsylvania, and that enabled us to get greater volume and accordingly some lower rates. So in this case, the cost reduction is expected to be about $60,000 over the course of a 12-month period. In terms of the cost that you're looking at for participating in the program, the cost structures vary, but a common way to do it is to include a charge in the per kilowatt hour price. So in this case, it would be in that 4.45 cents. There's a broker fee included. So in this way, the cost for participating in the program is included in the renewal pricing. Okay, so last but not least, I'd like to cover a utility bill audit. It's another example of how you can optimize rates. So the purpose of a utility bill audit is to find billing errors and opportunities for lower rates, but it can be done in any state, unlike the electricity procurement, which needs to be done in deregulated markets. Essentially, a utility bill auditor will review all your utility bills for savings opportunities. These can be mistakes, or they can be just that you're not on the most optimal rate class, depending on your usage pattern. Once they find a savings opportunity, they present their findings and request approval to implement them. Going forward, they share in the monthly savings. So the arrangement will vary depending on your provider, but in the case of the one that I've worked with, they take a 25% share for the first 2 years after the initiative is implemented. Since the auditing company is paid from the savings, there's not a financial risk of participating, even if they don't find as many savings as you had hoped for. So that's kind of a neat aspect of this program. So last year, I partnered with a utility bill auditing company to do a bill audit for my client, and I wanted to share you an example with you just so you can see what an initiative might look like. And so on the right side, the case study section shows the results from optimizing the rates for a warehouse in Kentucky. In this case, the utility charged $5.21 per kilowatt, but this was either the contracted demand or the actual highest demand over the last 12 months. And this utility company would charge you for whichever of those two is higher. So the problem that the bill auditing team found was that the contracted demand for this building had been set too high. This building has 2 accounts. So in the table, I've shown you what the contracted demand was. So for each account, it was about 1,500 kilowatts. The bill auditing company found that both of these accounts used much less each month. So the demand was closer to 500 kilowatts. It varied a little bit by account, as you can see in the table, but basically it was a difference between 1,500 and 500. So that extra 1,000 kilowatts, we were being charged for each month despite not using it. So what the utility bill auditing team recommended was redoing the contract and signing new contracts that would be for the lower demand levels that were based on our actual demand. So as a result, they're able to save that $5.21 times the difference in kilowatts, which is about 1,000 per account, which comes to a monthly savings of about $5,000 for each account. So it's $10,000 per month for the site. This was the largest opportunity that we found through the utility bill audit, but they found number of other opportunities. So I just wanted to show you what they were in this table to give an idea for the range of issues that you can find through one of these programs. So they range from finding an unused electricity account that leaving it open caused monthly charges to keep the to keep the meter open. So closing it enabled us to save that charge. Also, a number of opportunities for just moving the site to a different rate class. And then there were also some trash rate negotiations. So they're able to renegotiate the trash rates and get substantial savings while keeping the same service. So overall, the bill audit has found $256,500 in savings so far. And then again, the bill auditor in this case keeps 25% of the savings. So it comes to about $192,000 for the sites themselves to keep. Just to give you an idea for what that means in context, because it depends on the size of your portfolio, how many savings you can find. For us, this is a total savings of 0.7% of the utility spend. And then the retained savings after that 25% share is about 0.5%. And so the actual savings will vary, depending on your portfolio, but it's something I recommend exploring because it's really low risk way to get started while you're working on some larger initiatives. So that completes the 4 low cost initiatives I wanted to share today. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks so much, Holly. That was really interesting and really just practical things that people can do. So thank you so much for those case studies. Is there anything you want to add to your bio before we jump into a discussion and some Q&A?
I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers it. I just really enjoy finding opportunities to save energy and water. It's like a treasure hunt.
When I started my career in energy management with the state of Oregon, that was what I was doing kind of to kick off my energy career. And I called myself Sherlock Holmes. I was the Sherlock Holmes of the office, digging in and investigating. So I agree with you. It's a lot of fun and so satisfying when you find those little nuggets of savings that add up. So definitely. Well, we have some questions here that are starting to come in. And again, just a reminder, if you have questions for Holly, please do submit those and we'll definitely try to get to those if we can. But the first question is, have you experienced challenges with fixture delivery times due to COVID or impacts to the completion of projects or checks going out to customers or contractors? I might expand that to say not just fixture delivery times, maybe just kind of equipment in general. Are you seeing any impacts from COVID?
It's a great question. It hasn't impacted our lighting projects, although there was one that it nearly did. We were working on getting a project started in March, right about when COVID hit, and the materials were about to be ordered when everything started shutting down. And so it definitely came up in the project discussions, are we going to be able to do this project? How do we need to make adjustments? But we were able to just get it through, which was good because the site was also one where they had a lot of lighting out. So it was a sort of a safety concern to get it fixed. So that one, on the lighting side, it's been okay. Some of our other projects have been slowed down. So we have a solar project, for example, where construction was delayed because, being careful about social distancing and such. It's challenging because there are federal tax credits that expire at the end of the year. And I think, everyone wants to work together to make things work in the current environment because it's a challenge that we're all facing together. But it's definitely been a challenge on that solar project. And then some of our decommissioning projects also, as sites leave or as sites move, I help organize a program to repurpose their furniture and donate it to nonprofits or resell it, recycle it to keep it out of landfill. And we found that there are more restrictions on site visits and things like that are needed to start organizing those programs. So there's definitely been an impact. It's just been variable depending on, I guess, what stage of the project things are.
Yeah, Yeah, thank you. Well, your fellow panelist, Travis, has a question for you. Water management is a great initiative. What are some of the best quick wins you would recommend?
So one of them is if the site has irrigation, it's often a big opportunity. So one of the water management programs I've done is looking at what's called smart irrigation, which is essentially installing a weather-based irrigation controller. And so typical irrigation works on a timer system. So you set a schedule, you say, I want to water at these times during the week. And for this duration, depending on, a variety of irrigation zones. But instead, smart irrigation will take that schedule and then it'll adjust it. So if the weather is going to be hotter than usual, it'll bump up the watering times. If it's going to be cooler, it'll bring them down. And then it also, of course, includes a rain sensor, so it doesn't water during rain events. But in any case, it's a way that you can optimize your watering schedule to be more consistent with the plant need without sort of going out there and making manual adjustments all the time. They can also include a flow sensing option that we've implemented at some sites. It's more expensive, but this can help you identify water leaks because leaks are another area where you can lose a ton of water at once. And so what'll happen is when a leak is detected, it'll shut down watering to that irrigation zone so you don't continue to lose water, and then it'll throw an alert. So I guess there's some low-hanging fruit in terms of outdoor water savings. In terms of indoor savings, I do still keep track of water use increases in the utility billing data and investigate those with the site teams to see if there are leaks, like running toilets or issues with the equipment cooling systems like the one in the presentation. But unfortunately, we don't have access to interval data, and I think it does vary, so it may be available for your site, but I don't have more insight than the monthly billing data. So unfortunately, it's harder for me to find water issues as quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are some great suggestions. Thank you. We have another question here. Have you ever used solar lighting in lieu of regular street lights for savings? And are there specific manufacturers you'd recommend?
I haven't. I'm wondering if they're thinking of sort of solar tubes where you can get outdoor light inside. I haven't personally worked with those, but I've seen them on demonstrations. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe we can follow up with that attendee and get a little more specific answer. What is the trash rate mentioned in the utility bill audit?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I just meant the waste management pickup rate. So essentially what happened in the utility bill audit is they look at all the bills. So in our case, that's electricity, natural gas, water, and trash service and recycling. And what they did is they found that in a number of cases, the trash rates were higher than necessary. So it depends on your service provider, but in many cases, there will be an initial contract, and then after that contract expires, every year they may increase the rate by a certain percentage. And so you can end up paying quite a bit higher rate if you're not watching it than you started out at. And so what the utility bill auditing team did was they found sites with high rates for trash service pickup, and then they went out to the original provider and also to a couple of other providers, and they said, what can you do to bring down this rate by having the same container size and frequency of pickups? And then they were just able to negotiate a reduction.
That's interesting. Did they ever work at all with the sites to see if there was a way to reduce the size of the dumpster or the garbage can or whatever they were using at the site?
So not through the utility bill auditing program, although that's a really good idea. we do have a separate program to optimize the pickup frequency. So there's a monitor called a smart trash monitor, and it is used at the larger sites to essentially monitor whether the container is full or how full the container is. And then instead of getting the container serviced on a regular schedule, it gets picked up only when it's full. So it reduces the need for, you know, trash pickup trucks to drive around and pick up empty containers.
Oh, excellent. So that helps not only on a cost standpoint, but also on a fossil fuel standpoint. So that's kind of a win-win.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I was wondering, you mentioned kind of benchmarking, interval data, a lot of these ways that you're tracking based on the utility bills. Does your team work at all with data logging or any kind of way to actually track stuff over a period of time on the site?
We haven't yet, or I haven't worked closely with it to date, but I think I'm going to work more closely with building data coming up because we're just in the process of rolling out a smart buildings program, which will essentially be a way to remotely monitor the building automation systems and do some analysis on the trend data. So it's coming up as a project, but haven't dug into it yet.
Sounds fun. I love those meaty data projects. So here we have a question, another back to water. So who makes the irrigation water leak detection?
So there's a flow sensing device that gets installed, and in the case of the technology that we use, it probably varies depending on what you install. But when we did the smart irrigation upgrade, which involves essentially installing a new irrigation controller, sometimes called a clock or a timer, they swapped the controller out, and then they actually have to do some excavation, so digging and install like a flow sensing device, which then will detect the baseline water flow. And so you take a period of baseline readings and it essentially detects what is the normal behavior, what is the normal water flow. And then after that, if the water flow differs significantly from that baseline pattern, it will throw an alert, which you can see by logging into an online portal, or you can set it so it will email you and it'll say there's a high flow or low flow to this zone.
Okay, interesting. Well, we're getting low on time, so let's try one more question here. Have you done any behavioral change campaigns for electricity or water usage for tenants to supplement the operational and billing changes? I
haven't worked on a behavioral campaign yet, although I guess I'm also getting started on one. So we're going to have our first sustainability council at a new campus. And so we just completed an employee survey to find out which sustainability programs would interest them most. And it's looking like they're most interested in renewable energy and various waste reduction and recycling initiatives. And so it's at least the first projects I'm going to work on with them are those two, because that's where their interest is strongest. But I think we can definitely move from there into other things, like turning off equipment and reporting water leaks and things that would have more of a direct impact on the energy and water.
That's wonderful. Very exciting to be kicking off a new initiative, and engaging tenants in that way is really powerful. When I worked at the state as energy manager, was able to save about $500,000 a year on our utility bills just through behavior changes. So it is pretty powerful stuff.
Great.
All right, well, I would like to just take a moment and thank each of you so much. So Travis and Cynthia and John and Holly, thank you for joining us today and contributing your expertise to the conversation around building success stories. So thank you to everyone who joined us today in the virtual world. a shout out to my colleagues with the Columbia River chapter, both the board members and my members. So look forward to seeing everybody in person sometime soon. And I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thanks so much.
Thanks for attending day 2 of the AEE West Energy Conference and Expo. Another great day. We kicked off this morning with Deborah Smith, CEO and General Manager of Seattle City Light, our virtual expo, networking sessions, and very informative conference sessions in the afternoon. So as we look ahead to day 3, our final day of our event, we're going to mix things up a little bit. We're going to start with our conference sessions in the morning. So 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. we'll have 2 concurrent conference sessions. The first, the future of energy storage. And the second one, there's one near and dear to my heart, renewable energy plus energy efficiency plus demand flexibility equals decarbonization. Definitely want to participate in that one. We'll follow the morning sessions up with 11 until 1 o'clock, our virtual expo hall. Attendee networking and the AEE membership booth will be open. And then in the afternoon, we'll wrap up the event with our closing plenary keynote session. We have a great closing session with some rock stars of the energy industry, featuring Dennis Hayes, President and CEO of the Bullitt Foundation, Mona Tierney-Lloyd, Head of U.S. Public Policy for Enel North America, John Puskar, PE, a renowned industrial energy expert, Dr. Timothy Unruh, Executive Director of the National Association of Energy Service Companies, and finally, Paula Glover, President and CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. Should be a great closing, setting the stage for what we're doing after AEE West. So thanks again for attending. We will see you tomorrow morning, and have a great evening.